You know that phrase that everyone tells beginner gardeners, which is sort of grow the veg that you eat? Well, I am planning to take that a bit more to heart this year. We have 3 phases of the slightly complicated plan. Oh, exciting. Hello and welcome to Plot of Veg. My name's Ella and I have a half allotment plot up in East Yorkshire in the UK, where I try to grow and use as much vegetables as I can, with not a huge amount of time. About 1 to 2 hours a week is about what I have, and well, a few other days and things, you know, extra days to do kind of big jobs, but mostly I'm working on that sort of 1 or 2 hours a week. And not a huge amount of money to invest either. So it's a bit of a challenge, but it's quite an enjoyable challenge. And yeah, you know that phrase that everyone tells beginner gardeners, which is sort of grow the veg that you eat? Well, I am planning to take that a bit more to heart this year and plan my allotment based on trying to get as much kind of usable veg throughout as long a period of time as I possibly can. Now, I have been slightly inspired by this book, which is The Self-Sufficiency Garden by Hugh Richards and Sam Cooper. I have to say, inspired by, I probably won't be following it because it just, in terms of, he has quite a different mindset to me. He quite likes like a very, very detailed plan of exactly when you're going to do it, exactly what you're going to do, what vegetables you're going to grow where, everything like that. And I have no doubt this is a very good plan. You could just follow this and do and grow his this amount of veg in this amount of space. The other thing that attracted me to it, I forgot to say, was that he's doing it on a 10 by 12.5 metre plot. So the idea behind this book, by the way, is that you can grow enough veg to give a portion of veg, is it a portion of veg per person? Oh, I should probably read it again. But it's enough veg for a small family on a 10 by 12.5 metre plot. Now, my plot is 9.5 by 12 metres, so just under that. And I have a couple of beds here as well in the garden, that on like a really sunny patio where I tend to put sort of tomatoes and other hot loving things. So I think that should make up for the shortfall. So it should be possible to grow a decent proportion of the veg that we actually eat and use at the allotment or in the garden, and have like, that's kind of the standard place I'm getting my veg, which is quite good. Now, I'm under no illusion, like I want this to be fun. I don't want to be pushing myself too much or making it into like a job. I've got enough jobs. I've got a job. I've got children. I have enough things to do. I have enough responsibilities. But you know, it's nice to have goals to work towards. And this year I think I just want to kind of get the idea of it and try and do as much as I can, and then next year we'll build on it and we'll become better and better. So that's kind of the plan for the plot this year. Now, I started by thinking about what veg we actually like to use, what I use most from the plot, and what we like to eat most. And I think the meals I'm going to concentrate on are stir fries, so things that can be cooked quickly in a stir fry with some sort of sauce. Curries, possibly more like an autumn winter sort of thing, but things like squash are really nice. Either I grew a load of spaghetti squash last year, which we're actually still using. They've stored really well, which is excellent. And what I like about them is when you cook them, the flesh kind of goes down into sort of a saucy type texture. They don't hold their shape, they sort of disperse, I guess, and just take on the flavour of whatever you put in there. So if you've got sort of curry sauce or something, they just really bulk it out without you having to add a lot of coconut milk or other things. It's a veg sauce, really flavoured veg sauce. It's quite good. You know, I'm trying to get veg into small children, so we've got to go with what they'll eat and try and put as much veg as we can in with it. I have my trusty blender that does quite a good job. The other thing we do a lot is just like roasted veg, like stuff I can chop and roast along with whatever else we're having. So maybe sausages or, you know, chicken or whatever we're having already. I can just add some other veg and put an extra pan in just because it's easy and it's quick. and that we tend to use. Like we use a lot of beetroot, parsnips, all that sort of thing. Anything I can just chop, bung in a pan and roast is great. And then sort of steamed veg, we do a lot of. At the moment, I tend to be bought veg that I'm steaming, so it'd be really nice to be able to bring that in from the allotment and just and steam that. There's going to be some salady bits for probably more for my lunch boxes at work. So like salads, but like substantial salads. We don't want just lettuce. I want new potatoes. I want maybe some beans later in the year. It'd be really good, like a beanie salad. Last year I did some sort of salad with green beans as well. That was quite nice. And yeah, I have to have a little bit of think about exactly what salads I can do, but that'd be good. I think some of those bits may also end up in the plot here at my house, just because it's really nice on a morning to be able to just pick like whatever you want as you want it, rather than having to go down to the plot like in preparation for next day's lunch. I'm probably not going to do that. I haven't got time. I'm not organised enough, frankly. Being able to run out in the morning and pick what I want is really nice. So I'll probably do most of the salad stuff here, plus a few extra bits. And then soft fruit. We have 2 small children. We get through a lot of soft fruit. Whatever we can grow here will be eaten by the small children. So we've got kind of strawberries in. We've got raspberries in. I've got some honeyberry bushes that I've had in my garden for a while, which are not doing anything. So I'm going to try and move them down the plot and see if they work. Things like that. So that's vaguely the plan. But then, so we've thought about the meals, we've thought about what we want to eat, but I also want to think about what veg I can grow throughout the year to ensure like the longest season I possibly can, so be eating as many of those meals from the garden for as long as possible, as you possibly can. Now, slight problem with this, because I'm moving around all the beds, essentially I'm trying to raise. The problem we had last year on the allotment was that it was so wet until like May, really. Like the water table was almost at the water surface. Now, I know last year was particularly wet, but that was a bit extreme. And my plot being where it is, it's kind of like there's a very slight hill. Mine's kind of at the bottom, quite next to a little brook, and that doesn't help either. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to raise the beds a little bit further off the ground so that my plants have something to sit in, so they can dangle their roots into the water where it is, but they're not going to be sitting in the water. And I'm also trying to turn the orientation of the beds around, because there's a guy who's been on the allotments for 25 years, an ex-farmer, and I mean, I'm assuming he knows his stuff, and he sort of suggested to me, why don't you like try that? He tries to do that. He tries to sort of make sure his beds are running down, so the water will run down beside them, so it drains a bit better. And I thought that was worth a go, and I needed to move the beds anyway, so I thought this was the year to try and do that a bit and see how much difference that makes. So we're hopeful. But back to my point about having a slight problem, because I move everything around, I couldn't put stuff in sort of autumn, late summer, autumn, to be kind of ready for spring. So what you often do if you're being very organised and trying to get like a succession of food items throughout the year, is you put stuff in sort of later on in the year, let it grow, so in enough time that it'll grow big enough before the kind of winter hits, and then over winter it'll just stop growing and sort of, be itself, and just not really do very much. And then once spring hits, it'll come to life again and have new growth and put on whatever you wanted to eat. So for example, that's what you do with sprouting broccoli. You grow it over the summer, and then it goes relatively dormant over the winter, and then this spring, when things start to thaw, it shoots up broccoli heads, like, which are the immature flowers, aren't they? So it shoots up broccoli heads, and then you can eat them. Obviously you can't do that with everything, like not all crops are frost tolerant, so not everything can survive over winter, but there's certain things you can do, like kale or broad beans people do. I've only got broccoli, so that early spring harvest for me is going to be sprouting broccoli. So there's going to be fairly lean pickings in the allotment until sort of April, May, when the things I put in spring have had time to mature and do what they're supposed to do. So I think I've got to kind of plan for my first sort of when I can actually expect to get these sort of harvests and this continual meal veg is going to be after what we call the hungry gap, which is that time when between sort of April, May, when the stuff that you planted last year has kind of finished and the stuff that you planted this year is coming to harvest in sort of May. But that said, I mean, we've got to start somewhere, haven't we? It's a good time to start, and it gives me a bit of time to sort of breathe and not worry too much about it and plot my plot. That'd be good. After I said that this was a very, very complicated plan and I would never follow it because that's just not who I am, I have made my own very complicated plan, which I may not follow, but at least I've got somewhere, right? Yeah, at least I've planned it. I'll definitely change it because I don't really like to be told what to do, even by myself. Here is the plot as it is now. We've got raspberries. We haven't got very much in, but we've got raspberries in. We've got asparagus. We've got a very young asparagus. It's not going to crop this year. Might get something off it next year. I don't know because it didn't have a very good year of it this year because it got a bit wet and it got a bit covered in weeds. Never mind. We'll see what happens. It's going to happen at some point, right? We've got some fruit bushes in already. Got some things from last year, the sprouting broccoli. I've put some onion sets in, sort of this year. We'll see how they go. And then some cabbages from last year. There's some golden beetroot and some beetroot left over again from last year. I don't know whether that'll come to anything because it's pretty sodden and they may just die. But yeah, I don't need that bed for a while, so I'm just going to leave it and see what happens. But yeah, this is where we kind of are at the moment. You can see we've got the lowest and wettest end near the compost bin and the highest and driest area is kind of where the raspberries and the other bits are. We've got the raspberries area up here with all the fruit bushes and the sort of highest, driest area. This was from the plot holder before, but I think it's a good idea because that's also the most northern end, so it means that any shade that's cast is kind of onto the path between the allotments, it's not onto my bed. It's quite good. Then we've got this area, kind of the top right, where we've got 3 beds, 1 big one and 2 small ones. We've got this area, which has got the huge breastless cage, which was a gift from my mum last year, which is really kind of her. And we've also got like 1 thin bed and then like some little keyhole beds. I don't know. We'll have a go and see if this works. But I was hoping I think that was a nice layout for that sort of area. We've also got my son number 2's plot and fairy garden is in here because each of my sons have a little space in the allotment. Basically, I'm just trying to get them to come down there with me a bit more so I can spend more time there. But we'll see how that works. We've got a sitting area with this is an old polytunnel frame with wire, sort of chicken wire over it, which I use for kind of climbing things, and obviously sitting, and also dumping stuff when I get to the allotment because you've got to have so much to put everything, right? This is a area that's fenced with old chicken fencing, but it's also got Enviromesh fencing around it so that I can grow carrots and parsnips without the carrot root fly getting to them, hopefully. See how that works. Then we've got this area at the front, which is kind of lowest and one of the wettest areas of the plot. I've put a little mini pond, but I've also started to do some beds. I'm going to have the like some of the squash there, because squash really like the water. So if I can raise them off enough to be kind of slightly out of the water, they should be okay. And also you don't put them in until much later, so it's probably going to be a bit drier by then, we hope. There's also my son number 1's plot. He did some awesome sunflowers last year, so hopefully he's going to do that again. And then I think it has some flowers at the front. And then we've got this little area here, which is compost bins. There's a thing of leaves at the moment, and the golden beetroot that's still in. Okay, we have 3 phases of the slightly complicated plan. Phase 1 is kind of the early spring, end of winter, I guess it might be. The kind of before that last frost day. This has got to be things that can survive a top frost. Are okay being planted out or being started in the frost. So we've got more cold weather things like kohlrabi and pak choi, sprouts. Oh, I forgot to mention that I am planning to buy a little tunnel sort of covered tunnel for that one bed. I need to go and take the measurements of it before I do that. But I'm going to buy one sort of, I think, polythene tunnel sort of thing, to see if that makes any particular difference to kind of those early things like pak choi and kohlrabi. We'll see. Don't know. It's worth a go, I think. I've got lots of radishes in there. I'm going to be starting some things like cauliflowers and cabbages, so that when the sprouting broccoli is done, I've got little plants ready to go to put in there. And I'm going to be making some potato towers, which I'm quite excited to try. I saw this online with like straw. I don't have straw, but I do have some old leaves. I was wondering whether it'd be possible to make some with leaves instead. So what you do is you make like a layer of leaves, and then you put some soil in, some potatoes in the soil, and then another layer of leaves, and then some soil and some potatoes, and you kind of go up. So you kind of use the leaves around the. It's like a wire. Sorry, it's a wire kind of cylinder on the outside, and you use the leaves to stop the soil from coming out. But somehow I think the potatoes are supposed to be able to find the sun and then come out the sides and grow like that. What appeals to me here is, firstly, I'm using an area of the allotment that's really wet, and so it's good to have it up. Also, towers are kind of like space saving, right? And I don't really like digging for potatoes, so this means that when I want to harvest, I can just take the whole tower down and look for potatoes through the rest of it. So, and I've got a load of leaves, so I might as well give it a go, right? And I've got some wire. Brilliant. The biggest change is probably that I'm going to be trying to do some hot bins. Now, this is not something I've done before, but again, inspired by Mr. Hugh Richards. He used hot bins for his sort of early crops and get some early carrots, early turnips. I love carrots, particularly carrots that are fresh and from the allotment. So I'm really going to give it a go and see if I can get anything going hot. We shall see. If I can get 2 hot bins going, I'm going to do some of my seedlings on the second hot bin. But I could do those at home as well. It's just, it's just more of an experiment, see what happens. But yeah, otherwise it's sort of normal crops going in. You can tell from this that I really quite like radishes. I'm going to try some broad beans as well. I really like broad beans. Yeah, try some things, see what happens. I think in terms of meals, when we're looking at stir fry things, we've got kind of the maybe pea shoots, and I don't know how long the mange tout will take to come, really. Maybe they won't. Again, we're not going to have a huge amount this time, because we're going to be kind of waiting for things to come up. But if we can get some quick radishes for my salads, I'll be quite a happy bunny. And we're going to have sprouting broccoli, as I've mentioned several times. Kohlrabi and pak choi can both go to stir fry. That'd be really nice. It's coming spring onions. I get through so many spring onions. Broccoli rab is ridiculously quick growing, so if I can get that coming up, that'll start to complement the sprouting broccoli, I think. Then we've got phase 2 is kind of once that last frost has gone, and for me here in East Yorkshire that is about mid-May. It's pretty late. I will have needed to start off my tomatoes and my hot weather crops here in my house. I've got a little grow house in the garage, which I will show at some point, set up with some heat mats and grow lights to sort of start those things off out of the frost and keep them safe. But yeah, I don't have a greenhouse, so I have to be a little careful about when I start those, because as they get bigger I haven't really got anywhere to put them that's really light. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm going to have courgettes in. You can see now I'm starting to get lots of sort of hot weather crops, so I've got all my tomatoes in. Very excited about tomatoes. The thing that started me off growing was outdoor tomatoes, and I have some quite good varieties now. I've got some tried and tested ones. I like to save my own seed, so the plants that I grow are the ones that grew already in my environment. Last year I tested a lot of tomatoes on the allotment, and I mean my problem was they got blight, because they got blight. It was the perfect season for blight. Sometimes it's just going to happen, but they did grow well and they were fruiting, with very little involvement from me, which was great. I was surprised actually how well they did. I think they really liked the wet of the allotment, and the advantage of the wet is that I still didn't really have to water that much, even in the heat of the summer, whereas if I had those tomatoes at home I'd be sort of watering once or twice a day ideally, which is a lot of effort frankly. And yeah, down the allotment I was going down once or twice a week, which is a big difference. We're going to have lots of tomatoes. I'm really excited about squash. I adore squash in curries. I like it roasted in the oven. See, 2 of my meals right there. So yes, phase 2 is obviously the phase where there's potentially the most going on. We've got our tomatoes, we've got winter squash, we've got carrots, hopefully starting to get sort of the baby carrots coming, perpetual spinach, all these sort of things are starting to come through. We'll have some peas and lots of mulch too. The runner beans will go in, they'll start coming. So lots of options for my kind of stir fries, lots of options for my for putting into sort of adding to curries. I really like tomatoes to add to curries. I do quite a lot of tomatoes, of the plum or the cooking variety of tomatoes. They've got a little bit more flesh. They've got a bit more sort of flesh to juice ratio, so that makes them really good for sauces and for curries and things, because there's not as much water to cook off, and also the skins of the tomatoes are much thicker, which you don't really want if you're eating tomato, but if you're trying to do a cooking tomato, you want to be able to peel that skin off nice and easily. So I generally freeze them as soon as I harvest them, and then when I want to use them, I just pop them out the freezer and put them in some water just to defrost them a bit, and then you can peel the skin off, and it just often just comes up all in one go if you let just the outside sort of defrost a bit. So I'll be starting to have fresh tomatoes in my curries, which will be exciting. Courgettes, I tend to grow the yellow varieties because they're a bit sweeter, and I put those in curries, or I can chop them and roast them. I've got yellow patty pans in there as well. I really love those sliced halfway through, because those are the little saucer shaped ones, like that one, like a little flying saucer. But I tend to slice them all the way through, and then put garlic on them and a bit of butter or oil, and then roast them in the oven. Oh my gosh, they are so good. They're like the best things ever. They're so buttery and rich. It's great. So I'll have some summer squash coming, some tomatoes. We'll start to have lots of green things happening, just green in general. We finish off the broad beans. I'm hoping we'd have some sort of beetroot starting to come, and some spring onion. I'm hoping to get spring onions throughout the year, because I do use them quite a lot in various things. We'll see. And also the thing that I buy a bunch of and they go off in my fridge, it irritates me no end, because I would like to be using the veg that I don't really like throwing things away. I would like to be able to use the veg I have. As we kind of finish off the stuff in our hotbed, as we kind of pull out the crops I put in there, it'll start cooling off. It won't be hot anymore, but we don't really need it in the summer anyway. But the compost in there won't be really ready to use. I'm going to try putting a winter squash in there. I've heard you can do that, and the squash don't seem to mind the kind of high nitrogen content of fresh compost, whatever. They seem to love that. So I'll put a hungry winter squash in and see how that works. I'm going to leave one compost bin once it's kind of finished hotbedding. I'm going to leave one to be a compost bin, because actually they're quite useful as a compost bin. I don't want to completely put everything in there and not be able to use the compost bin. I hope by this time we're starting to get flowers, or big plants that are going to be flowers. I've got some chrysanthemums that I'm going to try. See, and I've not tried those before, but I'm hoping I can bring them home and cut them and bring them home, because I think they're really pretty. Quite fancy having a load of those. I might try some basil. I like having marigolds as well. I do like having flowers at different points of the plot, because firstly they're pretty, and secondly they bring the pollinators and things, so that's really nice. I'm not planning to plant in nasturtiums, but I had loads of nasturtiums this year, so I'm suspecting that we will have nasturtiums growing somewhere in the plot. So I'm not going to bother planting any. I'm just going to see whether they respawn, and possibly they'll be absolutely everywhere. The whole plot will be covered in nasturtiums, but we'll see what happens. I can always pull them out, can't I? Yeah, so that's kind of my phase 2 after last frost. Summer, heading towards abundance. You'll also notice though that I will purposely try and have things that are really easy to process, or I'm going to pick and use straight away. So yeah, I'm going to have a glut of winter squash at some point. I'm going to have a glut of tomatoes, but those are things that I tend to, so with tomatoes I just core them and freeze them whole, or I make them straight into sauces. Even what I discovered this year was green tomato sauce. So I just made it like a normal red tomato sauce, and I bottle it, and I've used it in green tomato curry. It's really tasty, really tangy, and almost slightly citrusy, but not quite. Yeah, tangy, I think is the best word for it. It's a completely different flavour. It's not very, I doubt it's authentic in a green tomato curry, I just really like it. But I find that the coconut milk can be a bit rich just itself, so it's quite nice to have that kind of balancing out. It's so tasty. I would recommend, highly recommend it. You can also use it for salsa, and I will be trying to grow some chilies here in my back garden. I have a really nice variety of chili called Nigel's Outdoor Chili, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a bog standard, unfancy chili. It's not super hot, it's not super mild, it's just really good. It's really standard, a good cooking chili. For my British palate, honestly, not that fancy a palate when it comes to chilies, to be absolutely honest. But it gives me red ones and green ones, and I just freeze those, and then I buck them out the freezer, chop them like from frozen so that I don't get chili all over my hands, and I just put them in things. But I also try and do a bit of salsa with them, with the green tomatoes and the chilies. So that's quite a nice thing to do. A lot of these things that I'm trying to plan, I'm also thinking, well, how am I going to harvest them? Where's my gluts? Am I going to have enough time to actually make use of these crops? Because you're always going to get a few things that you have ridiculous amounts of. You never, if the green beans go off, they really, really go, don't they? And the courgettes as well. Like, you're going to have, you may well have loads of those. Not much you can do about that, apart from eat them. Give them to your friends. But a lot of this, the fact that I grow a lot of winter squash is because when you harvest a winter squash, you then just cure it by putting it in the sun for a while, and then you leave it in the pantry, which I have. So we have an old coal shed we've turned into a pantry, and I just leave it there, and then when we want it over the winter, we just take it out and eat it. So that's really good. And I bottle or freeze my own tomato sauces, so I tend to make them into things and just do it like that. So those are kind of gluts I can deal with. There's a lot of things here, which we'll see as we go into the winter bit, which is on my phase 3, which I haven't quite got into. There's a lot of stuff that I can leave in the ground to be harvested as and when I need it, which is also a really good idea. So with that, we shall move on to phase 3. Phase 3 is kind of, so it's not winter yet, but it's kind of that period, kind of starting maybe late July, but I'd be starting with seedlings in late July, and then little small plants would go in kind of after the height of August. But for plants that are going to grow big, like I said at the beginning of the video, grow big over autumn and then crop in the spring, or things like pak choi, which are quite quick cropping, and kohlrabi, broccoli rabe, those things again, I want to be trying to grow another crop of. They don't really like the heat of the summer, they tend to bolt. Bolting, if you're not sure, it just means they're trying to put on flower heads and go to flower, and often when plants do that, they don't taste as good. They release, I don't quite know how, but they release some sort of hormone to try and stop things from eating them extra hard, and they don't taste good. So best way to stop that, or to get a harvest before that happens, which is essentially what you're doing, you're pulling them up before they manage to get the seed, is to grow them in conditions they like better, so a bit cooler. So we've got pak choi, kohlrabi, and things like mooli radish, but I love those really long mooli radish, they're delicious. I've also got some swede which I want to try this year, and turnips and things like that. So yeah, those can be kind of left in. Actually, I'm not sure about turnips, I need to double check that, but things like carrots and parsnips and swede can be left in the ground until you want them, and celeriac can be left in the ground until you want to harvest them. So again, that means I don't have to process them, I don't have to store them. They're there for me when I need them. The things I'll be harvesting at this sort of time, the cauliflowers will be doing their thing and hopefully giving me some crops. The cabbages will be, it's still actually going to be, some of the start of this phase 3 is actually still late summer, so we're going to have tomatoes until they get blight probably. We'll start to harvest the winter squash, a couple of them. The runner beans will go until the frost or the cold kills them. The peas, I'll probably keep trying to have more peas so we've got more. Things like that. So the idea is kind of you're continuing the crops that will continue, trying to put stuff in that will then give you some harvest over winter. Yeah, so it sounds like a good plan, doesn't it? Sounds like a good plan. We shall see. That's what we can do really, isn't it? Try it and see what happens, see what works. Thanks for listening to my very long conversation on what I'm doing this year. I'm also going to do another video on what I did last year, and look back. I took a few videos and photos and things over last year, so I'm going to try and do a little compilation of that and talk about what I did and what worked well and what didn't. But yeah, that's me for now. That is the plan. Hopefully I will look back on this in December and I will have been feasting throughout the year on wonderful allotment veg and not swearing at slugs. But you know, that could still happen, so we'll see. It's lovely. If you've listened to this far, thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you again soon. Hope you also are having fun planning for your allotment or your garden, and if you want to, join me again. Thanks very much. Bye. This is Ella from the next day after I've recorded the plan for 2025. I just wanted to come back and give you a realistic idea of how I approach plans. This is not where I decided yesterday I was going to put the roof job. This is a different place. This is the end of one of the bigger beds that's going to have tomatoes in it. So yeah, they're flexible plans, right? They're flexible plans. It's good to have an idea of what you're going to do when and where things are going to go. But it's all, it changes when you get to the plot and you decide something is better. Have a lovely day and enjoy gardening.